Hello everyone. So in last class, or we can say as last session, we have discussed what is JavaScript, purpose of JavaScript, and we have discussed what is single threaded, what is synchronous, what is programming, and we have seen the. So in last class, or what is programming? Apart from that, we have discussed the installation of VS Code and Node.js. This is what we have covered in the last session, guys. Okay. Now, in today's session, let's discuss about variables. What are variables in JavaScript? Now, so many people don't know what are variables. So people will explain variables are like containers. They will explain like variables are containers where we store the data. This is what people will explain. And this is not the right answer, guys. And we should not explain like this in our interviews also. Then what are variables? So basically, variables are name of memory location where your data is stored. Where your data is stored. So what are variables? Variables are the name of memory location. They are the name of memory location where data is stored. Where data is stored. So in your system, you have a memory. Let's assume that this is your system, and in that system, you have some memory. Now let's assume all these are memory. Now in this memory, we are going to store some data. Let's assume that I am storing here some data called 100. Now this data is going to occupy some space in your memory. It is going to occupy some space in your memory. Now this location inside your memory will be defined in the hexadecimal format. It will be defined in the hexadecimal format. Like this. Like this, every location in your memory will have some address. Now, as a developer, as a human, we cannot remember this address because it will be in the hexadecimal format. So to remember or to refer this location, what we are going to do, to this particular location, we are going to assign some name. To this particular location, we are going to assign some name. And that name is nothing but your variables. That's why we say that variables are name. They are the name of this memory location where your data is stored. Where your data is stored. Okay. Yeah. Now, how to create these variables in our JavaScript? That is what we have to understand. How to create variables in JavaScript. Now, if you want to create variables in JavaScript, you have to follow some syntax. You have to follow some syntax. Now, what is the syntax to create a variable? If you want to create a variable, first you have to use scope statement. You have to use something called scope statement. Then you have to add one space and then you have to name your variable. You have to add a name for your variable and then semicolon. Then you have to add semicolon. This is how we create a variable in JavaScript. In JavaScript, there are three scope statements. We have totally three scope statements. And those three scope statements are var, let, and const. So whenever we are creating a variable, we have to use any one scope statement. Either you have to use var, or else you have to use let, or you have to use const. You have to use const. Any one you have to use. But when to use var, when to use let, when to use const, what is the use of this scope statement, why we are using here scope statement, all those things we will discuss once we start with the advanced JavaScript. Right now, if you want to understand what is scope statement, what is the difference between them, when to use var, when to use let, when to use constant. If you want to know all this, then you should have some knowledge on JavaScript. Like you should know functions topic, you should have knowledge on object topic, you should have knowledge on scopes topic. You should know about hoisting, you should know about shadowing, you should know about closures. So this many things you should know. Then only you will be able to understand what is scope statement, what is the difference between them, when to use which scope statement. But right now we don't know all these things. That's why we will discuss this later part. Right now what we will do, blindly we will use var scope statement to create a variable. So here I have to use a scope statement called var. Blindly use var. Don't worry why we are using. Right now use blindly. In coming sessions you will come to know that. Then use space, and then you have to name your variable, for example, seed and semicolon. Now this is how we create a variable in JavaScript. Like this, you can create any number of variable. So this is the syntax. This one is the syntax, and this is the example to create a variable. So let's write our first line in JavaScript. So to write first line in JavaScript, what we have to do? First, we have to create one folder. In any drive of your system, create a folder. Then you have to open that folder. Open the folder in Visual Studio Code. To open the folder in Visual Studio Code, first we have to open the Visual Studio Code and the folder in Visual Studio Code. Third, you have to create JavaScript file. Create a JavaScript file. Fourth, create a variable in JavaScript file. Create a variable in JavaScript file. These are the 4 steps what we have to follow. So let's follow these 4 steps. First, let's create a variable. First step is let's create a variable. Now how to create, let's create a folder. First step is let's create a folder. How to create folder? I will go to my some drive. Like I will go to my E drive in my system. Under training, under free JavaScript series, I will create here one folder called session 2. So first step is done. So in any drive at any location, you create one folder. So folder is done. Now we have to open the Visual Studio Code, and whatever folder we have created, that folder we have to open. So how to open Visual Studio Code? Go to your desktop, double click on this icon of Visual Studio Code. So when you open Visual Studio Code, by default, it will open the previous folder that you have opened. It will open the previous folder that you have opened. Now I don't want to open this. I don't want to work on this folder. I want to open my folder. So click on file option, click on open folder option, navigate to the place where you have created your folder. And select your folder, click on select folder option. Now your folder will open in your Visual Studio Code. Now once your folder is opened, close this welcome file. Now here you create your JavaScript file. Now, how to create JavaScript file? For that, you can keep your cursor on your folder name. Keep your this cursor on your folder name. You will get some icons here. Click on this first icon. When you click on first icon, it will ask you what name you want to give for your file. I am saying variable.js. So here .js is called extension. So this extension indicates which type of file we are creating. So file is created. So we have created one JavaScript file. Okay. Third step is create JavaScript file. That is done. Fourth step, create a variable in JavaScript. How to create variable? For that, we have to use var as it is, then give some name. That is seed. So here, this is the first line we have written in our JavaScript. So here we created a variable called seed. Like this, I can create any number of variables. I can create one more variable called username. I can create one more variable called something like total price. Like this, I can create any number of variables in my JavaScript file. Now, inside this variable, we can store some data. So let's understand how to store the data inside your variable. Okay, I am trying to teach you guys everything from the basics, guys, completely from zero. So these sessions are designed for those people who don't know anything in programming. Okay, the people who already know a little bit about programming, they have to keep little bit patience. Because in this way only, I am going to teach a very complicated topics. So my plan is to take this JavaScript series for next 2 months. It means I want to teach JavaScript in very depth. Whatever topics I am going to cover here, those topics I won't cover in my live sessions also. So in whatever platforms I am working, there I take live sessions on JavaScript and I don't cover all the topics of JavaScript because of restriction they provide to me. Because they want JavaScript should finish within 20 days or 15 days. That is the reason I cannot cover everything. But here I don't have any restrictions. That's why I am want to create JavaScript in very depth. We are going to learn all the basics, all the advanced concepts. Okay. So if you follow consistently, surely you will master JavaScript. Whatever knowledge I have, I will provide all that. So we are going to learn this JavaScript in very depth way. Now here, let's understand how to assign data to our variable, how to assign or store data inside the variable. Now there are two ways to store the data inside the variable. First way is, first you can create the variable like this, var city, and then you can store the data inside that variable. Something like this. You have to use your variable name, then you have to use assignment operator, and then you have to assign some data. For example, I am assigning here Hyderabad. Now here, this equal to is called assignment. We call it as an assignment operator. This is value. This is your variable name. So this is your variable name and this is your value. This is your value. Nothing but data. So this is variable name and this is your data. Or you can call it as a value. Okay. And this one is called, we should not call this as a equal to. This we have to call like a assignment operator. We call it as a assignment operator. We call it as a assignment operator. This is one way. So first we can create our variable and then to our variable we can assign the data. Another way is while creating the variable we can store the data. So here I can create like this one variable var id. And at that time only I can store some data. This is also another way. You can do in this way also. Now here again same, this is your scope statement, this is your variable name, and this is your data. This is your data. So you can write like this 2 steps, or you can write like this in 1 step also. So if you are creating the variable and at that time only if you are storing the data, this part we are going to call as variable initialization. We call it as a variable initialization. This is called variable initialization. Here, this part is called variable declaration. So if you just create a variable and if you don't assign any data to it, it is called variable declaration. We call it as a variable declaration. Variable declaration. And when we are assigning the data to variable, this part, this entire part is called variable assignment. We call it as a variable assignment. We call it as a variable assignment. Variable assignment. So variable declaration, variable assignment, and variable initialization. So these terms you have to remember. So when we discuss in future the difference between var, let, and const, there these terms are going to come into picture. Variable declaration, variable assignment, variable initialization. Now let's try practically. Let's go to Visual Studio Code. Now here already I declared the variable. This is called variable declaration. Variable declaration. Now to this, in this variable, I can store some data like this city equals to, for example, Pune. In the same way, this is the username. Now in this variable also I can store some data like username equals to, I am storing here my name like Sagar. Now this is total price. Here also I can store some data. Total price equals to some amount. So now this is called variable declaration. This is called variable assignment. Variable declaration, variable assignment. Variable declaration, variable assignment. If I want, I can do variable initialization also. How to do? Like this, var id equals to 101. This is variable initialization. Var, for example, pin. This is also variable initialization. Okay, so you should understand what is variable initialization, what is variable declaration, what is variable assignment. Now suppose I have created here a variable and in that variable I am storing the city called Pune. Okay, later on I want to change the city name. Instead of Pune, I want to store here something called Delhi. So I can do that as well. City equals to, I can say Delhi. Here, first we are creating the variable. In that we are storing Pune. Then we are reassigning the new data called Delhi. So first time when you assign the data to your variable, it is called assignment. It is called assign. Second time, if you assign other data, any new data to same variable, this is called reassignment. This is called reassignment. So assignment means first time we are assigning some data to our variable. Reassignment means second time or third time you are assigning some data to your variable. After first time, if you assign any data to your variable, that is called reassignment. Okay. So this is what variable part. Now, when we are creating variables, when we are giving names to our memory location, we have to follow some rules. When we are creating variables or when we are giving name for our memory location, we have to follow some rules. So what are those rules? Let's try to understand. So here I am going to add rules to define variable or rules to give name for memory location. Memory location. So what are the rules we have to follow? Let's try to understand step by step. Okay, the first rule what we have to follow is whenever we are naming a variable, our variable name should start with letter or underscore or dollar. So variable name should start with any letter from A to Z, or it should start with underscore, or it should start with dollar. So your variable name should start with either letter, any letter from A to Z, or it should start with underscore, or it should start with dollar. Apart from that, you cannot start your variable name with any other number or special character. So you can start your variable name something like this. You can say var name. This is valid. You can say var underscore ct. This is also valid. You can say var dollar price. This is also valid. All these names are valid. But you cannot start your variable name something like this. You cannot say var 1, 2, 3. This is not a valid variable name. You cannot say var something like this ampersand ct. This is not a valid variable. You cannot say something like this var something like 1 at the rate. So you cannot start your variable name with numbers or any special character apart from underscore and dollar. This is the first rule what you have to follow. Second rule, when you are giving multi names for your variable, then you have to follow camel case. Second rule is use camel case when you are naming variable with multiple words. So suppose if I want to create a variable called total price, then that total price should be in the camel case. Camel case means the first word, all the letters should be in the lower case. Second word, first letter should be in the upper case, remaining should be in the lower case. That pattern we call as a camel case. For example, if I am creating a variable here, total price. If you see here, I have two words. I have a total, I have a price. Now, if you see the first word, all letters are in the lower case. Second word, first letter is in the upper case, remaining is in the lower case. Remaining is in the lower case. So this is what we have to follow. When you are using like this multi words, then this pattern you have to follow. Suppose if you are using 3 words to define a variable, then also we have to follow this camel pattern. For example, I am saying something like store user data. I am creating a variable called store user data. So now I am creating a variable with 3 words. Now if you observe these 3 words, the first word, all the letters are in the lower case. Second word, first letter is in the upper case, remaining are in the lower case. Third word, first letter is in the upper case, remaining are in the lower case. So this pattern we call as a camel case. So we should not create variables like this. Var total price. This is not a valid variable. This rule we should not follow. Var I cannot say like this, total price. This is also not valid one. We cannot create our variable something like this. Var I cannot say like this, to or t O T A L, something like PRIC. Like this, we should not create our variables. So we have to follow this pattern only. All these are, whatever I am mentioning in the red color, we should not follow this. All this we should not follow. All this we should not follow. This is the rule 1, rule 2. Rule 3, we should not add space or any special character between two words while naming your variable. Okay, third rule is don't add space or use any special character to divide or to separate words while naming a variable. Don't add space or use any special character to separate words while naming a variable except underscore and dollar. Except underscore and dollar. It means when you are creating variable with multi-names, don't add space. So we should not create like this variable, total space price. So we should not add like this space between two words. Or else you cannot use like this, var total hyphen price. This is also not valid. We should not use like this special character called hyphen. If you want, you can use something like this. You can say var total underscore, you can say price. This is okay. This is okay. You can use underscore or you can say var something like is stock. Like this also you can create. So you can add dollar or underscore only. Apart from that, you cannot use any other special characters. So this green color is valid, red color are invalid. So this is valid both and these two are invalid. This is one more rule what we have to follow. So the first rule is variable name should start with letter or underscore or dollar. Second rule is whenever we are naming variable with multi-words, it should follow camel case. Third rule is we should not add space or use any special character to separate words while naming your variable. Okay, so these are the rules what we have to follow when we are creating variables. Clear, guys? So just have a look on this. Yeah. One more rule we have, we cannot use reserved words for naming our variables. So fourth one is don't use keywords or reserved words to name a variable. So every programming language will have some reserved words. They have reserved some words. So those reserved words, we cannot use our variable name. For example, there is a word called function, which is reserved in your JavaScript. There is a word called class, which is reserved in your JavaScript. There is a word called this, which is reserved in your JavaScript. There is a word called const, var, let, if, while. Okay, all these are the reserved words. Like this, we have so many reserved words in our JavaScript. Now we cannot use these words to create our variables. We cannot give these words as a name for our variable. So we cannot say like this, var function. This is invalid. We cannot say var, invalid. We cannot say var let, invalid. We cannot say var class. all these are invalid. So we cannot use the reserved words. We cannot use reserved words as a name for our variables. This is one more rule what you have to follow. Next, all your variables are case sensitive. Fifth is variables are case sensitive. Variables are case sensitive means, suppose if I am creating here a variable something like this, where total price. And if I am creating a variable called var total price. Now these two variables are considered as a two different variable, because here L is in the lowercase, here L is in the uppercase. So these are considered as two different variables. They are not same variables, two different variables. So when we are naming the variables, that case sensitive matters, lowercase, uppercase matters. So you have to take care of this case sensitive also. We have to take care of this case sensitive also. Okay, so these are the rules what we have to follow when we are naming our variable. These are the 5 rules what we have to follow. Okay. So in today's session, we have understood what are variables, how to create variables, what is variable declaration, what is assignment, what is reassignment, what is variable initialization, and we have discussed naming convention for variables. These are the concepts what we have discussed. Okay, so I am thinking, guys, to keep our sessions only for 30 minutes as a duration, because in YouTube when we upload a longer video, people won't watch much. So shorter video, people are more interested. So I'm thinking that daily, like not daily, alternate days, we will take only 30 minutes, but we will try to learn everything in very depth. Let it take 1 month, let it take 2 months, no problem. But whenever you want to rewatch, then it will be very convenient for you if it is a short video. When we create long videos, when you see the duration, your interest will decrease. That is the reason I am thinking that in YouTube, let me keep videos only 30 minutes. Okay, let me know, guys, whether this idea is good or bad, or should I increase my time? So let me know your feedback. Okay, so today I will stop here. Now in next session, we will discuss about data types. What are data types in JavaScript? And what is loosely typed programming language? So what is the meaning of loosely typed? What is dynamic typed? That all those things we will discuss in our next session. Okay, so that's all, guys, for today's session. Remaining things we will discuss day after tomorrow. Thank you for attending this session.